Animal Land by John Hauge. Chapter 3. Bernard's Speech. It had only been a couple of days, but the glow of the parade was already starting to dim. It was time to write the next chapter in Animal Land. Alice Starr, who had led the animals for the last 2 years, was ready to step down from power and retire to his home in the East Grasslands. Alice Starr had saved Animal Land from the biggest threat to date. He was not just an administrative leader, but had actively fought in all of the battles. But in doing so, it had taken a lot out of him and aged him beyond his years. Optimism was climbing fast after the war. Other lions were ready to step up and run for leader, but there was an old familiar figure in Animal Land with a new voice and with fresh ideas. He had tweaked the interests of all by sending Elliot to hype some special address tonight. Bernard disappeared from public view after the death of his family during the war. Now Bernard was ready to re-enter not only public life, but the politics of Animal Land. Bernard had always been an animal feared by man and revered by his peers. For most of his life, he quietly shouldered his share of the load for Animal Land. There was never any hint that this fearsome force of Animal Land could ever be defeated. He seemed to have a permanent snarl that matched his warrior persona. No one would have imagined that the word sympathetic would be used to describe how his peers would feel towards him. After the parade, this would forever be the first. There was mixed speculation as to whether even the tragedy of this last war could be shrugged off by Bernard. With the pending announcement, it appears that those who thought he could move on were correct. Only Bernard knew the truth. He thought, with the loss of my cubs in the war, who will protect Animal Land? Bernard had given serious thought to this question. The question had dominated his thoughts since that fateful day. Offspring gives an animal confidence in the future that any unfinished work could be taken up by them to finish. At the end of the war, Bernard had no confidence that this was the last war. He had no confidence that the younger animals would be up to the challenge of another war. His whole life had been dedicated to the principle of an animal oasis, surrounded on 3 sides by the tyranny of man and 1 side by the uncivilized frontier. Now, clarity was with him for the first time to see a different future. But was there going to be enough time? With this announcement, he will ensure that man will not ultimately win. Although the steps he would take had already been well thought out, Bernard had waited until after the parade to share them. Nothing was to upstage his announcement. His choice of a messenger had gotten the other leading animals of Animal Land excited about hearing his speech, but had not given away the message. Bernard waded through the assembled group of Animal Land's leading animals and took mental attendance. Alice Starr was there along with the other Animal Clan leaders. There was Stuart, the leader of the Elephant Clan. He was one of the heroes of the last war. There was Margaret, the leader of the horses. Jessie, the leader of the tigers, was present, along with Charles, the leader of the chimpanzees. Charles was the reluctant leader who did not want to go to war, but once at war, he distinguished himself in battle. Now that the war was over, Charles was happy to be back running his peanut plant and apple tree business again. Bernard walked into the assembly area and up on a rock. This allowed him to see all who had come and to be seen by all. It appeared that Everett sent Dominic to represent the camels. Dominic was all passion and flamboyance compared to a more analytical personality like Everett. In many respects, the 2 camels complemented each other. This played out today. Everett, as leader of the camels, would never allow himself to be summoned by any animal other than Alice Starr, the current leader of Animal Land. To be summoned by Elliot was probably taken as an insult by Everett. Hence, Everett sent Dominic instead. Other animals were also present. Bernard did not invite them directly. They had come just to see what the big mystery was. By not inviting all animals, Bernard had sorted out those animals who had interest in the political future of Animal Land from those animals that just wanted to go back to their regular lives. He wanted to focus his message on only those who needed to be influenced the most. Bernard was still an impressive figure. His extra wide, dark black stripes and muscular build gave him a young and virile look. However, the number of scars covering his body indicated his advanced age. Like the rings in a tree, scars on a tiger seemed to correlate with age. Even without an accurate count, Bernard was indeed a seasoned fighter, having the distinction of being the only living animal to have fought in 5 wars with man. Alas, this would be the end of the bloodline. Bernard started to speak. My fellow animals, I have a big announcement. As you know, before the war, we were all struggling to survive. The able-bodied animals couldn't find enough food with all of the war preparation time they spent. The older animals suffered because their young couldn't provide enough. Some younger animals went to seek their fortunes beyond animal land to territories beyond the uncivilized frontier. They were not available to help fight in this last war. Some areas were more prepared than others. Some animals were better trained than others. There was bickering over priorities. The war, however, united animal land. The war showed us all how if we organize ourselves as a village instead of individuals, so much more is possible. Bernard paused as to give the last message more meaning. The others looked around. They knew there was some merit in Bernard's words, but they also reflected on their own memories of the war. It was patriotism and strength of family that motivated most of them to work together and achieve something neither could do on their own. Rich and poor animals alike joined forces. Not all of the young animals that left Animal Land were absent during the war. Most that sought out opportunities beyond Animal Land before the war came back to serve in the military. But after the war, each animal went their own merry way, free once again to pursue their individual passions. This had always been the tradition. It may not be as efficient as a centralized structure, but this system had formed a nation and successfully defended the nation multiple times. The results of Animal Land's political system were undeniable, even if the methods could be targeted for fault. The animals waited for more. Certainly, Bernard had more to say than just a few sentences. Alistar was the defender of the status quo. He did not see anything wrong with the pre-war days. Bernard, my dear friend, we have always had favorable times and more difficult times since the founding animals first treaded into this valley back before any of us were around. They gave us our village, and we have persevered where other animal villages have failed. Bernard could see the expressions of agreement among the assembled animals, but was not concerned. You are right, Bernard began his rebuttal. The founding animals did leave us with a great legacy, but we can do better. The leaders that followed continued their traditions, but the costs grow greater. Animal Land needs a change. I'm going to stand for leader of Animal Land to see to it that no animal in this land will ever have to leave again due to economic hardships. To change our priorities such that animals can spend more time enjoying the victory rather than preparing for the next war. We must set our expectations higher than simply not having to live under the threat of tyranny from man. We can do better if we organize ourselves. Working together, we defeated man. If we continue to work together, we can do so much more. The old can be provided for, the lame cared for, and the injured treated. We can do all of this, as well as ensure that we are ready for the next war. Working together, rather than as a bunch of individuals, we can create an Animal Land paradise for our grandchildren. The words Animal Land paradise struck a chord. Alistar felt as if he was set up to pull down a fruit-laden branch so that Bernard could savor a rhetorical treat. It was hard to argue because who would not want better for their grandchildren? Bernard continued. Charles, how many of your peanut plants survived today? If you had more time to work your plants and fruit trees instead of preparing for war, wouldn't all of Animal Land have more food and a better quality of life? Who will inherit your orchards and fields if another war breaks out and kills your sons? Bernard paused and waited for an answer from Charles, even though he knew he was not going to get one. When he felt his point had been made, Bernard turned to the next influential animal that needed to be persuaded. Jesse, I saw you striking the men in the parade. Yet, how many tiger cubs have been lost to the poaching hyenas while you were at war? With our current army, we could always defend them. Margaret, the same with your folds. Sure, today you can outrun the hyenas, but what about tomorrow? Then Bernard turned towards the last of the influential animals that he needed to persuade. Dominic, you think you are safe, but man continues to move closer. A loud noise one day, a small puff of smoke, and that would be the end. Bernard gave another pause to ensure that Dominic's mind had converted his words to an image of man firing a gun. He then looked beyond the influential animals to the rest of the animals in the crowd and raised his voice an octave. We all face the prospect of being captured or eaten. It doesn't have to be this predictable. If we can dig traps to catch man and keep him from our kin, then we can build a society to protect the newly born, the old, and the frail. Doing what we've always done will only harvest the same results: war and destruction, followed by rebuilding and preparing for the next war with man. If we work together in peace as we did in war, we can break this cycle. With a different direction, we can truly live in peace and freedom and comfort as the founding animals intended for this land. Bernard's message was indeed one for the ages. The others didn't know how to react. His recount of history was accurate. The goal was something that no animal could disagree with. It was the method that was different. Animal Land had never had a non-lion in charge, and certainly Bernard's idea of working together in peacetime had never been spoken by a lion leader. Bernard didn't wait for a debate. As the others were looking at each other wondering how to respond, Bernard headed off to take his message to the non-politically motivated animal. For those animals who did not come, it would take a different approach. Omega. Soon Bernard was repeating his message of change all across Animal Land. The seasoned tiger took to this campaign as he did with war. Full throttle. He had the enthusiasm of a cub. Animals were talking, especially the young animals. Despite the age difference, they connected to his message. The adrenaline of a new campaign masked the pain coming from his body under the strain of all the walking. He moved quickly and talked to just about every animal. The lions did not know where to begin to fight back. The old guard animals were not ready to campaign in this fashion. The lions were ready to stand on the rock and accept the decision of the animals based on their strength of character, success in battle, and humility in peacetime. The issues were timeless. There were a lot of food stocks to be replenished. Man traps needed to be rebuilt. Barriers needed to be rebuilt. It had been done before and can be done again. It wasn't easy work, but it was rewarding work. Every animal was happy. Bernard remembered listening to his grandfather telling stories about his father's time in the circus. Based on this, he knew that despite all the hard work to date and all the hard work to come, Animal Land had fulfilled its promise. The young were talking amongst themselves about all of the possibilities that Bernard's speech could lead to. But for Ronald, something didn't quite add up. As one who may be called upon to lead Animal Land, Ronald studied the history of Animal Land and the founding animals in the canyons. He knew the awesome responsibility any animal had in passing Animal Land on to the next generation. Having fought in war, he knew how desperate the fighting was. The last victory could easily have been seen as proof that man could never conquer Animal Land. But those involved in combat knew that the outcome of this last war was much closer than anyone knew. Ronald knew. Ronald also knew from his father what had transpired in the previous war. The casualties this time were higher. The time lapse between wars was shrinking. The technology used by man continued to improve, while the animal's technology still relied heavily on training, practice, and individual skill. Alistar didn't want to lead anymore, and Ronald refused to run. With the excitement of Bernard's entry into the leader contest, no other challengers emerged. Ronald would have been a logical choice, but even Ronald did not consider himself more worthy than Bernard. Bernard was simply a figure above challenge. There was also the issue of heredity. It was the circus owner's eldest son that inherited the business from the father. To succeed one's father as leader of Animal Land seemed too manlike. Succeeding Bernard seemed more in keeping with the ideals of Animal Land. After a brief campaign, the vote was to put Bernard as leader of Animal Land. Ronald came in second despite never announcing that he was running. For the first time, an animal other than a lion had been charged with the governing of Animal Land. Bernard started the job on day one by planning for his inauguration. He waited until just before dusk. A large fire was the centerpiece with Bernard and some selected animals on one side and the rest on the other. A bonfire was a first for an event such as this. Normally the smoke and the wind would create problems. But the winds were calm tonight and the wood must have been extra dry. This wood had to have been cut a long time ago. In his inaugural speech, Bernard laid out his vision and his promise. As we set a course to improve Animal Land, I can assure you that we will always be free to live our lives in the pursuit of more food and bigger dens for our families. I can assure you all that we will always remain free of scavenger animals and the tyranny of man. To keep us free, we must be ever vigilant to the encroachment of man onto our territory. Keep our noses into the wind and our eyes looking with the wind. No animal must ever talk to man. Listening to man is inviting tyranny. Man only wants to hurt us. With man at bay, we can pursue bigger dens for our families and longer lives for our parents. We have shown that we can do great things working together. Now it is time to harness that greatness to make Animal Land a better place to live. I see a place where the older animals' lives can be extended. I see a place where more time is spent enjoying our lives in this valley and less time postponing our lives in this valley. Working together, we can bring more drinking water to the thirsty, as opposed to each of us gathering drinking water on our own. We must stay strong and work together to preserve the peace. But beyond that, we can work together to make this piece a piece of our dreams and not the old piece of our history. As long as we follow the maxim of what's good for one animal is good for any, we can have this celebration of our victory over man each and every day during the peace. Bernard then went into a patriotic song to commemorate the victory and the bright future ahead. It was sung to the tune of Clementine, which the old circus owners would play to signal that it was time to erect or tear down the tents. It was the ultimate of ironies to turn a song that represented tyranny into one of victory. On a more practical note, it was also easier for all of the animals to learn a new song when the melody was already familiar to them. Across the water, across the desert, came the founding animals. They found harmony, they found community. In this valley with waterfalls, there were hardships, there were struggles, way back then and even now. But we can endeavor for a better future. Listen to me, I'll tell us how. If we work together, we can measure all the fruits of new success. If the best of us helps the rest of us, all will have more, none with less. Conquered famine, conquered drought, conquered even the tyrant man. All our hardships will be comforts. If we labor like I know we can, all the animals in Animal Land. We pledge our allegiance to our flag. When it is flying, we know it's calling. We can do it again, let no one lag. The song was a great success and was soon the most popular tune in Animal Land. It was very hopeful and positive. After a war, everyone wanted to believe that something positive would happen in the future. Ronald found it hard to be caught up in the singing. He tried to sing, but the result was more of a half-hearted lip sync. In one sense, he was relieved to not have the responsibility of making the right decisions for Animal Land. But Bernard was going to be making some changes that no other leader had ever tried before. This worried him. He looked around at the assembled animals. Most were singing and did not share his worries. Then he saw that Stuart had heard enough. As the song restarted from the beginning, he saw Stuart and his crew of 5 working animals leaving the area. Stuart had more important work to do, probably heading out to start work on the defensive positions of Animal Land, Ronald thought. Obstacles needed to be put around a hill on the northwest boundary. Trailing Stuart and his team were a who's who of the available elephanets in Animal Land. It is one thing to talk about change. It is another to convince animals that know only one way to actually change. Elephants were not going to forget the old ways very easily. Ronald returned to observing the crowd and noticed that Dominic had not resumed singing either. He had taken a position next to Bernard. On Dominic's other side was Elliot. Dominic's action was sending quite a clear message to the onlookers, although it might only be me, Ronald thought, who was receiving the message. Judging by the onlookers' actions, they were not interested in the politics, but just the singing and the camaraderie of the moment. They didn't think it was unusual that there were no lions sitting alongside of Bernard. Actually, that wasn't true. Technically, Elliot was a lion. But to say that he represented the warrior lion clan required significant mental gymnastics. Speaking of camaraderie, Marty must be around here somewhere, he thought to himself. A few more visual sweeps among the assembled animals, and he had a match between the vision in his mind and the reality in his eyes. She was singing and looking at Bernard. She was just as pretty as she was before the war. During the war, Ronald didn't really have any time to notice such things. Any loss of concentration during wartime would destroy any future with a lioness. Now that the war was over and Ronald was seeing Marty again, he could allow the old feelings he had for her to once again command some of his attention. Ronald took a serpentine path towards Marie. He wanted any onlookers, especially Marie, to think that it was just chance that brought them together. As he moved, he continued to mouth the words of the song just enough to maintain neutrality, neither protesting against Bernard nor actively endorsing the tiger. Ronald also worked the crowd a bit. He nodded to some and put a paw on the back of others. He put on his social persona and masked, as best he could, his troubling fear of what the song represented. The labored path concluded with him on Marie's right side, behind her field of vision. He waited there until the singing finally stopped. He then approached Marie from her right side. Anyone sitting here? Marie swiveled her head slightly to answer the voice in her right ear. She didn't even need to bat her eyes for Ronald to feel them in his knees. Why, no. Go ahead. Marie, I haven't seen you since before the war. Marie responded as if she hardly knew Ronald by asking him to confirm his identity. Ronald. Ronald didn't believe that she was unsure of who he was, but he played along. Marie, you remembered me. I'm mighty flattered. Truth is, everyone in Animal Land knew Ronald, including Marie. Both accepted the white lie. She was definitely playing coy, thought Ronald. He didn't really know what to say next. Chasing lionesses was something he had to give up during the war. The formal school years where courting and chasing would first occur in a young lion's life were interrupted by the war. Ronald had to grow up faster than others to answer Animal Land's call. Some things didn't require school, and any casual conversation start usually involved the weather or current events. Ronald opted for the latter. Quite the speech. I guess. The song was more interesting. Are you into politics? No. I'm here with Elliot, who is helping Bernard. I see. Marty just looked at Ronald. She seemed to be waiting for more words from Ronald. Marty knew that Ronald was one of the most eligible bachelor lions in all of Animal Land. She wasn't going to let Ronald know this, though. She set high standards for herself. She wasn't going to be like her girlfriends who throw themselves at the war veterans. She wanted to be courted. She wanted to be wooed. She was in it for love or not interested at all. Besides, there was Elliot. Elliot knew what courtship was. He knew that both parties had to work at a relationship. He was attentive and spent the kind of time with her that Ronald couldn't. Ronald finally broke the silence. You make your home out by Cricket's Bend, is that so? Yes. I heard you had to tangle with some hyenas. Yes, again. I was glad to hear that you took care of them. Very impressive. Thank you. I had a good teacher when I was young. Marty was sure that Ronald knew that it was Ronald who taught her self-defense in their youth. She didn't have much interest in learning, but did like receiving attention from Ronald. Yesterday, the training actually came in handy. I suppose you did. Marty was flattered that Ronald had finally come out of his shell, but also worried that this flattery would show. Her girlfriends did nothing but ridicule her over having to come to Elliot's rescue. All of the male lions that she had talked with since the incident ridiculed Elliot as well. She was tired of hearing it. Ronald, as a rival to Elliot, had every reason to point out the primary fault of Elliot, but he didn't. This made Ronald different. He was special. It could very well have been him giving the address or leading the animals in song and not Bernard. Maybe he was done devoting all of his energies to Animal Land and now could devote some to her, she thought. Ronald was impressed that Marty remembered the lessons he taught her when they were young. Any mate of his was going to have to be independent. He knew at an early age that he was not always going to be able to protect his family. If he were to die in battle, he wanted a mate who could defend his cubs against hyenas and any other predator animals. The serious lionesses spent time on this type of training. The less serious lionesses spent time talking about the males and trying to get their attention. Ronald really had no use for those types. The flowers worn by Marty were in conflict with the story of her standing up to the hyenas. Mari continued. You seem to know a lot about me. Where I live and such. What about you? Where do you make your home these days? Here, there, and everywhere. Ronald was a bit embarrassed to say that he lived with his father and did not have a place of his own. He didn't have much to offer a potential mate at this point. I see. I see. How very interesting, Ronald. I think I've been to. There. Before, and pretty sure I've been to. Here. Where may I find? Everywhere. It was an interesting reply, and Ronald let a brief smile escape before changing the subject. It was a bit abrupt, but he wanted to know Mari's status. Was Elliot one of many or a special lion friend? Mari, I heard there was quite the gathering the night after the parade. You probably enjoyed that. I wouldn't know, Ronald. I left early. Really? The crowd started to break up. He looked at where Bernard had been speaking and saw that Elliot was heading back this way. A shout came out from one of the animals as Elliot passed them. One more time, louder, so that even man can hear from beyond the frontier. Elliot stopped as the animal was not content with just shouting, but grabbed Elliot. The animal forced Elliot to join a duet version of the song. Ronald continued with his inquiry. It sounded like Mar-E was associated with Elliot. Why, he could not understand. In a small talk voice, he thought he'd make an overture. He remembered another conversation maxim. It only applied to females, but that was the situation he was in. In any case, he was excited to have the opportunity to try it. He tapped down his excitement as to not scare her away. He opted for an opening that could be interpreted as humor if she wasn't interested. It also could be interpreted as a romantic overture if there were no strong feelings toward Elliot. The maxim was that all compliments are always welcomed. During the war, I heard a story that your father had first named you Beautiful rather than Mar-E because you were the prettiest lioness cub in all of Animal Land. I don't think so. No? Oh, that's right. Beautiful was your secret surname. Mar-E-S, Beautiful. I don't think so. Ronald could tell that she was enjoying making him correct his mistakes. He enjoyed it as well as he continued to make the deliberate mistakes. Then Beautiful must have been your title. Not just Mar-E, but Beautiful Mar-E. I don't think so. I think you misunderstood my father's words. Maybe it was me then. You. Was Elliot one of many, or when I was marching in the parade and saw you? It suddenly struck me that there sits the most beautiful lioness in all of Animal Land. It wasn't that Mari's name was beautiful, it was that beauty had a name, and its name was Mari. Mari lowered her head slightly and looked away. It was brief, and she resumed looking at Ronald. Ronald had succeeded. It was the equivalent of a boxer landing a clean punch on the jaw, causing the opponent to momentarily stagger. Only his word punch had not landed on the jaw, but right to the heart. You are quite the charmer, Ronald. Ronald was out of ammunition and didn't know how to follow up on that comment. He just stood there, silent, looking into those beautiful eyes. I'm a bit surprised. 2 years of nothing, and now all of this tonight. I didn't know that you even noticed me. I've been busy. The duet ended. Ronald looked, and Elliot was heading towards them once again. Did Elliot cut some of the verses? Or is it that with Mari, he lost track of time? In any case, he wanted to spend more time with her. Come, Mari. We've, got some things to do. It was nice talking with you, Ronald. Hopefully, it won't take as long to talk again. I'd like to continue this conversation. Goodbye, Mari. Elliot. Goodbye, Ronald. Ronald watched the two of them scamper off into the darkness. He looked back and saw Bernard and Dominic clearly by the light of the fire. The other animals were silhouetted and unrecognizable. The fire now seemed to have purpose, noted Ronald.